Um, by law, by the Antiquities Law in Jordan, all antiquities the Department of Antiquities is responsible for all archaeological sites, maintaining, preserving, and all rehabilitation of the site is the responsibility of the Department of Antiquities. The government established Petra National Park in 1993 because it was obvious for the government that it needed a governmental body to manage the site and the surrounding area. And throughout these years, there was management bodies for Petra, but this did not allow the representation of all towns and villages in the government structure. As you can see, this is the structure of the governmental body. Number of management plan has been done for Petra sites since 1994, and other types of master plans before had been made. The master plan for the protection and use of Petra National Park was in 1968. The UNESCO Petra National Park Management Plan was in 1994. Also, there was management analysis and recommendation for Petra World Heritage Site in Jordan in 1996. In 2000, there was Petra Archaeological Park Operational Plan. And in 2010, there was a strategic master plan for Petra region. All these plans, unfortunately, they didn't recognize or give the opportunity for local communities to be involved. Recently, UNESCO and the Petra Archaeological Park and the Department of Antiquities, they are now preparing integrated management plan for Petra World Heritage Site. It is going on recently. I would like to give you a brief knowledge of the local community in Petra, which is the local community based on 6 main towns and villages. One of them, Beda, Sehun, Wadi Musa, Taibe, Rajif, and Laga. As you can see in the map here, the location of these villages. Wadi Musa is the residents of Wadi Musa are considered the primary beneficiary of the tourism industry and host the largest number of touristic establishments and services in the region, because Wadi Musa is very close to Petra Archaeological Site, or the site itself. Taibe is the 4th village in Petra region. It has been inhabited by Lesrur, and they are coming from the Layathne sub-tribe since the beginning of the last century. Oops, sorry. We didn't talk about Beda. Beda was one of the main suburbs of the Petra during the Nabatean period, and it is considered one of the oldest Neolithic sites in the world. It has also a community from Ammarin tribe. Housing in Beda was built around 1985-1986 to resettle the Bedouin of the Ammarin tribe. Sayhoun, it was built to resettle the Bdul community, who was relocated out of the Petra archaeological site between 1985 and 1987. Their lands, Bdul lands, fell between the caves in the main archaeological site. This is the image of Wadi Musa. Wadi Musa also by night. Finally, there's Rajif and Dlaga. Dlaga is geographically the most distant from Pab, from the archaeological part. It is the home of Sayadne tribe or Sayadne community. They used to cultivate cereals and herd goats, sheep, and camels for their livelihood, the same as Rajif. Bedouins of Petra inhabiting the site or around had found certain equilibration between their own lifestyle, the archaeological site, and the visitors, whose number was growing dramatically since the inscription of the site in 1985. And the tourism industry has become the main source of the income for the local communities. Being the nearest to the archaeological site, in Wadi Musa, they get the benefit most from the other local communities. For example, there are 27 restaurants in Wadi Musa, 39 hotels, of which more than half of these hotels owned by local community of Wadi Musa. Tourist travel agency, there is 27 tourist travel agency, 5 are owned by the Bdul. In total, around 40% of the residents of Wadi Musa benefit from the tourism industry. For example, also the local community like Bdul, they go every day to Petra. They are working like tour guides and provided plenty on or various activity, music, entertainment, camel and donkey rides. They are really strongly attached to the site, and they still keep their ancient, they still very tied to their ancient valley. On the other hand, the benefits of the tourism industry remain largely beyond the reach of the other villages in Petra region. They remain isolated and suffer from high poverty level and sometimes unemployment and lack of access to the basic services. And you can see local community, they are selling some souvenirs here, also some kind of handicraft. This is a lady from the Bdul. She keeps her traditional clothes and wearing. They used to rent camels and donkeys for ride for tourists. This is also a scene of using horses for riding. This is rababa, which is a kind of musical instrument, very old one, and the people are still using, and it has a very magnificent sounds. This is actually an actor. I don't know what is his name. Johnny Depp, yes, who they filmed in Petra, and he was engaged with local communities wearing their dresses and so on. And this is another type of getting benefit from the tourist industry, like selling artifacts. There is also several projects which has been done in Petra that like the WTOL, this is a winged lion. This project is to protect and present the Nabatean temple of the winged lion. They used to, as you see, engage local community in some conservation work. Especially, they hired women in doing some kind of conservation work. And one of their aspects is raising awareness, where they raised awareness between school. There's a participation of from different various of school. And there's another project with from UNESCO part, which is aims to reduce the risk of landslide in Petra, to identify the unstable area and slope sectors, monitoring the slope, developing capacity among the local authority. This project is also aiming to transfer knowledge through training in the field of survey methodology and capacity building, training using simple and sustainable technologies like debris terracing, water diversion through engaging local community. And they hired a lot of several people of local community. Plenty of local organizations like Petra National Trust and Beit Al-Anbat Society in Wadi Musa, Beda Tourist and Archaeological Cooperative Society, and many others, maybe 19 organizations. Now, I will not talk a lot about the recent integrated management plan did by UNESCO, because it is focused on local community and the partnership. Now, finally, lessons to be learned. The local community in Petra has been affected and in turn has impacted the tourism industry in Petra. Economic opportunity provided by tourism are benefiting the communities, but not distributed equally. So some villages has get benefit more than, or rather than other communities. Resettlement of a tradition community and its impact, land use and ownership. This is creating also a huge problem. Because when they resettled the Bdoun in Sayhoun, they didn't take in consideration, for example, the architectural space to be adapted to the Bdoun life, the increasing of people. So these houses are coming very small to by time for people. And sometimes it happened that children with working in tourism industry, they drop the school. So maybe we can have to look forward about these problems and make the local community more engaged in decision making for the management of the sites. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Asma, for your informative presentation. Now we can travel into the depth of South Asia towards Nepal with a presentation entitled Kathmandu Valley World Heritage Site, presented by Mr. K. Weiss, the President of ECOMOS Nepal. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure being here and presenting with such wonderful, experienced people. And I might have presented something quite different if I had known what all was going to be presented in the morning and now. My presentation is focused on Kathmandu Valley, but I have a lot of sort of maybe slightly theoretical points that I've sort of added, which hopefully also brings together a lot of issues that were raised through these presentations and the questions that were discussed. I have basically 4 points that I'll be discussing, talking about changing understanding of cultural heritage and defining community, sustainable development and its relevance for managing cultural heritage properties, and then actually talking about how it links to Kathmandu Valley and the living heritage, and resilience, improving livelihoods, and continuity of cultural heritage. And these are all linked to my involvement with the Kathmandu Valley since it was danger listed in 2003. So part one, it's a bit of a definition thing, but I think it's good to go through this and really try to figure out what we're talking about. I've worked on, World Heritage sites that are very different. So I think this whole understanding of cultural heritage is sort of expanding. Like the mountain railways of India, Lumbini, which is sort of an archaeological and a pilgrimage site, Bagan in Myanmar, we have monuments and landscapes and the whole issue of how to deal with agriculture in a site like this. And then Samarkand, which is again a city, and the question is how do people live within this, this city, which is very interesting specifically for Samarkand. So again, this whole understanding, it's very broad. All these sites have very different issues that have to be dealt with. So when we talk about trying to create one set of procedures, or it doesn't work. I think for each of these we need to look at it in a very different way. So I've been sort of trying to study this a little bit, so just please bear with me that it's a bit of a theory thing. But looking at defining the heritage, it's always been exclusive in the past. We've always looked at the big palaces and the monuments. But things are changing, and we're sort of looking into more of inclusive. We're trying to be more inclusive. And if you look at examples, for example, these are from China, the imperial palaces on the one hand, but now we're looking at sort of settlements and dwellings and urban fabric where people still live. We look at the pleasure gardens of Suzhou, and now we're looking at the cultural landscapes and agricultural landscapes. And these are absolutely different approaches and understanding of what cultural heritage is. And when we look at, how do we manage these sites, somehow it has to change from this very autocratic way of dealing with cultural heritage to something that is democratic. Now, I'm not quite sure whether democratic is the right word, but in a sense of getting everyone to participate in this. For example, the sites where we put a fence around it and said this is a monument, and we control who goes in and out, to something where the communities are part of the cultural heritage, and we have to sort of consider them as not only as participating, but actually that's part of the whole site. And it's a totally different understanding and approach. And I think this change in mindset, we all still have to deal with it. I think we're slowly starting to understand it. But I think even with, ECOMOS and all the experts, and I think we're still struggling with this change that's going on and how to deal with it. So when we talk about inclusiveness and there's a community living within this site, The question is, what community? And I think that is something that, again, in many cases is not very clear. So we talk about the community that created the heritage, or is it the community that's caring for it? And in some cases, there is no community. And so, the ideal situation is you have a very homogeneous group of people that you call community that created the heritage and is caring for it. But this is hardly ever the situation. The reality is that the community is changing. So either it's changing from within, or then it's changing that you have an influx of other communities, and then it becomes much more complicated. So I think when we talk about community, I think we really first of all need to understand what are we actually talking about? What community is this, and how is this community related to the cultural heritage that we are trying to safeguard? Then of course you have the heritage, which is a shared heritage where you have different groups, and this often causes conflicts, but then it's possibly also a means of creating a dialogue between these groups. But it's, well, very often very difficult. Be positive about it, or try to be positive about it. But anyway, I think those circumstances we can't ignore. I think we need to sort of also keep that in mind. Then going on to the second part of sustainable development and its relevance. And I'm actually an architect planner, and I'm not a conservation architect. So I'm actually looking at it more in the sense of, how do we actually deal with change and not with trying to stop change, but deal with change. And so I've gone to some definitions. I'm sorry, but it might be relevant. Trying to understand, sustainable development, I think this was one of the very, very early definitions, basically saying that sustainable, it's development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own need. And I think this is still very relevant, and I think this is really the basis for the understanding of sustainable development. Now, heritage, this is a definition I think I made up myself, but hopefully it's acceptable, that heritage is something inherited from the past of value and worthy of preservation for future generations. So if you compare these two definitions between sustainable development and heritage conservation, we're looking in the present, it's something of value or something that is needed, which basically, we're looking into the future, which is worthy of preservation for future generations, or we're sort of trying to also consider future generations and their needs. And the interesting thing is, of course, that heritage conservation actually adds a further dimension of the past. And but somehow it's actually, these two are together. I mean, sustainable development has to include heritage conservation if there is, of course, heritage around, and the other way around. And I think this link between sustainable development and heritage conservation needs to be really further sort of integrated into this general approach to sustainable development, which I think UNESCO is trying very hard, but I believe a lot of the other international organizations haven't really accepted this as a standard procedure.
Progress is being made.
Progress is being made. And just for example, I've been working on Lumbini, and this has been a sort of a larger regional planning that we've been, I must say, still trying to work on. We haven't really managed to get too far on it, but the idea which is based on this regional planning was that we link it to the government planning, which is more or less, we have Lumbini around here. This is one of the biggest, sort of a planning access and development access for industry and urban expansion. And what we've been trying to work at is look at the development indicators. You don't have to read that, I'll explain. It's basically that we have the challenges in this area are child labor, illiteracy, child marriage, education, health, forestry, environment are sort of the challenges. And the potentials in this area are farming, road density, and cultural heritage. So I mean, basically, if we look at it, we look at, you develop tourism and farming to improve the health and education and environment of the area. And we've been really working with the government to look at this. And this is a region probably with several thousand archaeological sites, smaller and larger archaeological sites. And that we take this as the basis for this sustainable development of this region. And if we look at, instead of trying to develop industries in this area, we really have to find the potential for development based on something that's appropriate for the area with its archaeological sites, which is really something that can help develop the area and, of course, the communities there. Now, just to get to the Kathmandu Valley and linking that to the living heritage. So the Kathmandu Valley was inscribed in 1979, one of the very early sites to be inscribed on the World Heritage List. It has 7 components or monument zones, the 3 city centers or Durbar squares of Kathmandu, Patan, and Bhaktapur, the 2 Buddhist stupas, and then 2 Hindu temple complexes. So the Kathmandu Valley was inscribed on the danger list in 2003 due to uncontrolled growth and loss of historic fabric. And we prepared an integrated management plan, which then led to the Kathmandu Valley being taken off the danger list in 2007. We continued working on the management plan, and of course we had the earthquake in 2015, and now we're sort of trying to, we're struggling with dealing with the earthquake damage. But if we look at the sort of the living heritage, even after the earthquake, all these festivals continued, and we have in each of the monument zones we have these chariot festivals. And they're Buddhist, Hindu, they're actually very sort of local community-based festivals. And these continued even after the earthquake. And I think this is where we really try to understand that the heritage site and the resilience of these are based on not only the monuments, but something far beyond. And as long as the community continues with these kind of activities, the reconstruction or the rehabilitation of these sites is possible. And just looking at this one chariot festival, it sort of, the community from the different parts of the city, they pull this chariot through the city, and it links the different communities together. It sort of links the different parts of the city together, and it defines the city also physically. And to ensure that this festival can continue, one, you have to, of course, have this belief system, or that the local community, still believes in actually carrying out these festivals. But then it's also the question of knowledge, of rituals and procedures, and also the materials and expertise required for construction of the chariot. And also that we don't build any physical obstructions where the chariot has to be pulled, like pedestrian overbridges, which was in one location, we had a problem with that. These festivals are linked to this Gutti system, which is sort of this religious, functional, the different types of Guttis. And more or less, they're linked to either their caste, meaning their religious affiliation, their sort of family groups, or where they live. And it's a very complex kind of a social system which defines these communities. And they also have these Guttis that look after the temples and the community buildings, which are linked to land which have been donated to the Guttis. And the income from that land is used to maintain the monuments. Now, the problem was that, the problem we're facing now is that in 1964, these Guttis were nationalized. And it was a clear step by the king at the time to take away the powers of the Guttis, and also that the government could administer the land. So they had a lot of land, and to control that, the government nationalized the Guttis. So you have these community systems nationalized, and, well, it doesn't work. So now instead of the communities actually looking after the monuments, the government has taken over or has the responsibility for the monuments. And so the stakeholders have changed to the departments, the municipality, the corporation. And right now we are facing a bit of problems where the government is, of course, trying to look after a lot of these monuments, but they can't look after all of them. And we're trying to go back on this and saying, okay, we can't recreate the good teas, but how can this system somehow be recreated in a modern version, which is something that we're still working on. Now the last part, 1 minute. We had the earthquake, and here, of course, the community are the first responders. They have got in, and got very involved with these monuments. The only problem is that, now how are we going to reconstruct? And we did a lot of, some research. We understood what the problems were, but to rebuild, who's going to rebuild this? And again, we have the drawings, but without the artisans and without the know-how, we can't rebuild it. And we're actually stuck. On this monument, on the one hand, the government wanted to give it to the local government. The local government has been there was sort of a struggle. The community came in and said, no, we're going to do it, but we haven't been able to really get this organized. And in the end, we're really looking at the question of reuse of material. We have to get organized in connection with what kind of materials are we going to use, and then the craftsmanship, and really bringing these together. And these collapsed monuments, it's a sort of a assembling of them, but the knowledge is based with the artisans and not with the contractors. And we've been trying to get the contractors out of these projects and bring in the artisans, and that's been really the major struggle. And basically, again, the continuity and the resilience is based on the next generation. So as long as these kids find it fun, pulling the chariot around, whether they believe in or understand what it means or not, the chariots will still continue being pulled into the next generation, just as maybe with a different motivation, but there will be continuity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. K, for your excited presentation, and sorry for being harsh, pushing for time limitation. Our last but not least, from Iran, our colleague Siafaj. He will present to us experience in the engagement of local communities as stakeholders in the management of World Heritage Sites in the Eastern European countries. Please.
Can I ask you to start the PowerPoint later from the page 12 then? This is the. Hello everyone, and thank you for your invitation, UNESCO office and the regional governments of Sindh. I'm really happy to be here. Unfortunately, I'm not presenting the case studies of Eastern European countries. I'm just gonna give one hint about the one Eastern European case study. But I will talk about the community, since we are talking a lot about the local communities. I want to give just one first appointment of this discussion is nothing for us without us. So this, we have to keep it in mind that if we are not involved, nobody else can help and do things for the sites, in this case of heritage management, but in all the parts of the management in projects and development. Involving is essential to give communities the sense of ownership. This is also another hint. But the ownership, the communities are the owners. They are the real owners of for example, in this case, of the heritage. So we have to involve them from really beginning. This is the really important point. But who are them? Who are the communities? We always discuss about the local communities, but we never discuss about how to find the local communities and how to really identify them, and how we can involve them then. once we identify the local communities, how we can involve them. We got a really good example, for example, from Bangladesh. I was really happy to see that. So it's really interesting. And I may ask also, one day you're going to make a museum, a new museum for the products that you are making within this project. This is really interesting thing. And this is an example to give the opportunity to improve the quality of life, for example, with the projects, and then the step 2, what we do with this project. So the major thing is the quality of life. We are doing things for the community to improve their quality of lives and to keep the sustainable development, as you said before. And when we have to do this. We had to do it before, we have time now to do it, it's never late, we cannot wait for a lot for the future generation, we have to act now. So these are just points that I want to mention. Maybe they are really simple, but sometimes we need to repeat these simple points to do the projects in this field. To work with the community, we should sensibilize the community. But how we can sensibilize the community? I don't want the PowerPoint, please.
आपका दोस्त को
Yeah, I don't want it. Thank you. To sensibilize the community, we have to consider the territory. So the territorial factor is really important. We have to see the territory. The uses of the territory, the profit, the values, and the interests. So the interest could be personal, common. We have to take the consideration of that. The territory, as you said in your presentation, for example, the territory is the main factor of the territory. And the uses of water, the water management, for example, is a good use and good example. The profit is important, and the value, which is money. We have to consider always the money. The education, we have to invest in the education to inform and to share, to work with the community, and make partnership. He said to make the partnership, to involve. The partnership is really important in this case. I just took some examples of your discussions. And to finance, I think that you said about the financing of working with communities. I'm going to go through some UN guidelines about major groups and stakeholders. The Earth Summit in 1992 was recognized that achieving sustainable development would require to active participation of all sectors. In that event, they formalized 9 sectors of society to consider as stakeholders. The first one is women. We cannot do anything without women, without the participation of women. Children and youth, we need their energy, we need their ideas. Indigenous people, of course, workers and trade unions, farmers. And then we go through more organized organization like a non-governmental organization, businesses and industries, scientific and technological communities, and local authorities. These are coming always later than women, children, and youth in this case. The World Heritage Capacity Building Strategy in 2011 adopted and a lot pushed on capacity building. The capacity building for World Heritage Conservation. This is really important tool of UNESCO in this case. So we have the best practices and we have communication tools. So we have to share. I think that this was really good to see your best practices, your best experiences, to share. This is a communication, and this is how we can learn and do better projects in this field. So the role of local communities for sustainable development, it's absolutely important. This is also mentioned by UNESCO in 2002 in the 14th anniversary of the convention that you mentioned this morning. But we have also the agenda 2023 for sustainable development. That 5 critical areas for humanity and planet was divided, was shown, which is people, prosperity. That I'm going to say just 3 of them because these are 3 that are more important in the community participation. Is people, prosperity, and partnership. So the local community, the value, the economic of culture, for example, in the field of cultural heritage, and partnership. We want to create an effective global partnership for sustainable development, which will embrace all countries and stakeholders. This is one important point for this agenda. According with the World Heritage Center guidelines, sites are requested to present a comprehensive management plan that I hope that all the site managers have it. These management plans should be able to set out adequate preservation and adopt measures to involve local communities. To generate local development, as it mentions, but just it's mentioned 3 factors: culture, communication, and sustainable development. We have to go more deep in this field. There are possible approaches in heritage management. We have to have a management plan, adequate management plan. The approaches could be conservation approach, authenticity, integrity. I think that Mr. Salmon, they underline on more in this field, but value-based approaches, people-centered approaches, and monitoring effectiveness approaches. There are different kind of approaches that we need to use. So maybe we talk more about 2 approaches in this session. We need more also to invest in value-based approaches, which is OUV. It's outstanding universal value, which is one of the 3 pillars of heritage sites inscribed in the World Heritage List. And monitoring effectiveness approach, which is, and UNESCO is stressing a lot in this now. So the monitoring every year, every month, I cannot say, but should be really participative monitoring approach. Then we go through the government's arrangements. This is more critical maybe in many countries, as in my country, for example, because the governance is made by the government all the time. But we need to also have the shared government, to share the government with other communities. Governance by private sector, in many countries they do that, and governance by local communities. I think the shared governance could be really the good approach at least in this part of the world that I know better. Now you can start the slideshow, Mr. Please. Can you start the slideshow from the page 12? The one, another page, next, yes. I had to present some best practices and good experiences, but I didn't understand well. I'm presenting the worst cases, not the good practices, the bad practices. Sometimes we need, I'm sorry. Sometimes we need to see, it's important, yeah. Yeah, it's lessons learned, exactly. But yeah, we need to see what some countries try to do and where they failed. So this is about Iran. It's this case studies of inclusive sustainable growth. The quality is not really... Okay, thank you. The Inclusive Sustainable Growth is a project made by UNDP in Iran. Unfortunately, UNESCO has no participative project in Iran, so it's always really governmental governance projects made by UNESCO in Tehran. But UNDP tried to make inclusive projects. There are many projects that they did, but I go through 2 of them, which they are important also for this session, which is heritage. Conservation of Iranian wetlands. So UNESCO is really active in this field. As you know, the Man and Biosphere Reserve, for example, of UNESCO, it's something really amazing. And in Iran, we have a really important lake in northwest of Iran. It's called Lake Urmia. But the Lake Urmia is really is ending. Its life is ending, and the life of the community around this lake is ending. They made the project since many years ago, but it's not working. to give the model to engage communities for sustainable agricultural practices and production. But they took this as a model for other also regions in Iran. On paper, it's really good, but in practice, it's not working now. Okay. I'm sorry, the quality of the image in my computer is perfect, but here I cannot see really the... So you can see there is Urmia Lake. And here is the other example that they are doing the same level of management. Okay, Urmia Lake is a protected national park. It's a UNESCO map biosphere reserve, and it's in the Ramsar wetland international importance. So it's really highly internationally recognized site. This is no. Since I learned this, it's okay. This is the lake. It's quite big. We have two main cities around the lake, two centers of two regions, East Azerbaijan and the West Azerbaijan. And the major issue for these two cities was to connect these two cities together. So what they do is just go around the lake. But then they had the idea to cut the lake in two and make a bridge. And they were successful in this. They make this bridge going through this island, going out to the other side. But what was in some 7 years, the effect of this bridge to the lake was this. So this is a national park, this is a Manon biosphere, it is also a model of sustainable agricultural development in Iran. And this is what is going on this lake. So this is the reality. What they are doing is to cut the head of this mountain, to put the earth in the basement, the bed of the lake, and to make the bridge. Because it's highly salty, it's maybe not like the Dead Sea, but it's the level of salt is that much high that they cannot make the concrete or other structures to make the bridge. I'm not good in that, but they failed, so they started to put the earth in it, actually, and just to leave a small part for the bridge. So this affects really badly the lake. Okay, I don't see the whole... What happened to this is it was the community start to rise, to protest, and to make activities against this bridge, not the government. The government still is going on with this operation and with this idea. But for example, this is the image of the film. It was to use this as a metaphor for intolerance and injustice. So I'm not going to any political discussions, but just to see the local community, even small artists or big artists as he started to protest in a way, but in other way, with the film, with photographs, with marching in it, and so. These are also tools that we can use for the management, because we have to understand the need of the community in this case, because their agricultural products, it's totally changed. They are not able anymore to produce in this part. And the other one is conservation of the Asiatic cheetah and its natural habitat. These had a good effect on the Iranian Cultural Heritage Organization, because the cheetah is living in a different area of Iran. They submitted in the World Heritage tentative list a unified region that englobe the cheetah habitat in it. And it's called Turan in 2008. It's a Turan Biosphere Reserve. And I hope that is going to submit it one day as a list. The cheetah project is about declining. They are putting all the energy, but only 100 cheetahs are living now in this area. And they reduced really fast in this period of time. 2 minutes. So these are these areas of cheetah. So it's a really vast area, and they are englobing this area to one heritage site for the future submission. What they are using to sensibilize to people for the cheetah is to use the Iranian national football team. So since years now, the national football team always has this cheetah face in it. And now people are really talking about these cheetahs. They are really fast cheetahs. You see the posters, you see lots of communication. It's really simple. Maybe it's not working, but who knows? People think about that then. Now you see the cheetah everywhere. In the football shows and every night in the television. And so these are really simple tools to use. And I have this one case study of Serbia, Stariras, who my colleague had to present and who couldn't come here, so he asked me to do. And it's also an interesting site because this is in the top of a hill in Serbia. It's a religious site, but it's a mixed religious site. And to manage this, the area, the boundaries with this cultural site on top, they invited the communities. But they are from different ethnies and backgrounds and religions, so they cannot communicate together. You cannot put them on the same table. It's impossible to talk about this religious site in this area. So what they did, they asked to englobe also the city behind of this area, the nearest city, to the management plan. So in that case, it became more important and more interesting. So in that point, the communities, they decided to, okay, it's on our interest, and we have to deal with this. So just sometimes you have just one site, you cannot involve the community in it. You have to see it from an upper level. You have to see, okay, what we have beside this, and to involve and englobe it in this project. About values again, young demographic growth, cultural expressions, spiritual values, economical activities, tourism, and geographical values. These are like to see it from a higher level. Since I have 2 minutes, I have to be more faster.
Less now.
Less now.
2 minutes.
Okay, less problems. They were values and less problems. Interpretation and management. These are two things that we're always missing in heritage sites, maybe. We have to give a good interpretation. We have to have good information, signals, and marking, cultural valorization, but we have to inform people about that. And management. We need funding, we need networking, we need the local government help, regularity issues for legal and illegal activities, ownership, urban development should be involved. So these are all should be considered in our management plans. So we need really good, difficult management plans for our heritage sites. I think the interpretation and recognition is the more important points also. Maybe tomorrow we're going to have, this afternoon, we're going to have time to discuss about all these suggestions. As I'm doing this, maybe to facilitate, to moderate a group discussions, I will use the same presentation, maybe, hints, and then I'm going to have 2 hours. I think I was doing the program, so I can. Thank you so much. Okay. This is mine? Okay.
Thank you all for your kind attention, and we'd like to thank our presenters. They took us from the Aflaj in Oman, and we flew to the Rose City in Petra, and then we to Kathmandu, and the new definitions raised up by Kay was something worth to be discussed in the coming sessions. And of course, the close was with our colleague from Iran, and he raised a very critical issues to be discussed in our coming seminar. Thank you. But at the end, due to time limitation, we have space for one question. So who will be taking the honor to have this question? This is it's please.
The basic question is, we always assume as professionals, as government officials, some kind of a status of superiority that we know and we decide to value. heritage, whether it is tangible or intangible. And the community somehow, and there is a reality to that, fact to that, truth to that they don't know the value. Who decides the value? There is a paradox. We say they are illiterate, they are not educated, we need to educate them. The paradox is that they or their ancestors were not educated in the same schooling system, yet they were able to achieve a level of excellence that we think that we should put in museums and galleries and we should publish books on. So for me, the most important thing is they and us agreeing what is valuable. In Peshawar, we are facing the same problem. They are selling these architectural marvels and moving to these newly built, housing schemes. And they are selling it because it's no more cool to live there in those narrow streets. So this is an important point I wanted to make. You need to ask this question: who decides what is the value? We need to agree on the value of heritage, and that is why it is fading. Because if it had value for the owners or the consumers or the practitioners, we wouldn't be losing it at all. And this was my question to myself and everyone, to try to know how to deal with this issue.
Well, thank you. Your question is a very long comment and it's an important one. Really, it's a very important one, and it opens the window and the door for the coming brainstorming session, because Kay, in his presentation, talked about the new definitions, and if we could find a formula, or we could draw a line between the site needs and the community needs, and the sense of respect for both, which something is not that easy to reach. So I think in the coming session, I think it will be very rich in discussions. And thank you all for your kind attention. But before closing the session, there is a very important notification from the organizers, so please.
Yes, okay, thank you very much, Jack, to give the floor. Now, we have the two session has come to now to an end, but it's not yet. The end of the workshop. As you know, we have the session 3, which is perhaps the most important one, because I feel that many of you have lots of questions and lots of comments, and also shared your frustration with us. And this is now time to talk about more freely. And